Let's take a look at this image. Yes, an image, not a video. So, why is it that everything looks like that it's moving? Or, when you stare at a certain spot, it stays still? This is an optical illusion, and these types of illusions use patterns of light or perspective to take advantage of the disconnect that exists between sensation and perception. This is between what your eyes see and what your brain understands. So when you look at something, what you are really seeing is the light that's bounced off it and entered into your eye, converting the light into electrical impulses that your brain can turn into an image that you actually use. This process takes 1/10 of a second, but because of the massive amounts of information that your eyes are receiving all at once, it would be like trying to take one drop of water as you take a sip from your drink bottle. So, instead, your brain takes shortcuts and simplifies what you are able to see in order to focus on what's important, compensating for your brain's 1/10 of a second processing lag. Optical illusions fool us by taking advantage of these kinds of shortcuts. So, this psychedelic peripheral drift illusion is just one impressive confusion to your brain. This is partially just owing to how we perceive light and dark. So, our brains are able to see lighter values more quickly than we see darker values, which explains why the images seem to rotate towards the lighter shades. So, I guess what we've learnt here is that what you see is not always what you get.
Hi, my name's Pip and I'm a student at UNE studying a Bachelor of Clinical Exercise Physiology. Now, I thought I would start with an optical illusion to give you an idea of just how complex the brain can be, and to understand that what we're talking about here today is just a tiny portion of what there really is to know about the brain. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the role and the importance of sensory information in motor control, and in particular, our vision. Every day we are flooded with stimuli that affects our senses, and many of these, whether we realise it or not, are critical when we are performing motor tasks. I'm going to explain to you the role of the eyes and how they assist us in performing tasks. I'll briefly then talk about some of our other senses and how they assist our vision, and finally I'll explain to you what happens when a disease or an injury affects our eyesight. But first, I'm going to walk you through a few quick definitions.
Sensation is the bottom-up process by which our senses, like vision, hearing, and smell, receive and relay outside stimuli. On the other hand, perception is a top-down way that our brains recognize and interpret this information and put it into context. It is common for many people to misuse or to simply not realize the difference between sensation and perception, so it is important to understand that even though they are connected and one does affect the other, they are two different things.
For example, right now you're receiving the light from your computer to your eyes, which will send your data of that sensation to your brain. Your brain, on the other hand, is perceiving this information and telling you what you're seeing. That is, a person on the screen telling you the difference between sensation and perception.
Now, although we are aware of the things that we can see and hear, smell and touch, every mammal through evolution has its own thresholds of what it can and can't sense. For example, alligators have extraordinarily sensitive skin which allows them to detect vibrations in the water to hunt their prey. A catfish is wrapped in taste buds like a swimming tongue which helps it to detect flavour from all directions, whilst some deer can even sense when their diet is lacking in a certain nutrient and they will crave the food containing that amino acid. If only that was the same for humans and chocolate. The smallest detection of that stimuli is known as the absolute threshold of sensation.
So, for example, I'm going to give you 3 different scenarios. Firstly, I'm going to hold these 2 objects in my hand, a pair of scissors and a pencil. Now, there's a good chance that holding these, I'm going to be able to discriminate the weight difference between them. So, this would not be my absolute threshold of sensation for touch. Secondly, if I hold a pencil and a pen, there's a good chance that I may be able to tell the difference between them, and if I can correctly choose which one is heavier at least half the time, then I can move on to find objects which are, again, closer in weight. So if I was to then go and hold 2 pencils, one in each hand, and I cannot tell the difference between their weights, then the 2 objects with the closest weight that I could tell the difference between them, which is the pen and the pencil, would be my absolute threshold of sensation for touch, which their difference in weight that I found earlier is about 5 grams. Okay, so let's turn to our most important sense, vision. The receptors in our eyes account for 70% of the receptors in our entire body, and not only that, but nearly half the cerebral cortex is involved in vision, which is pretty impressive. So let's see how vision works.
Light bounces off the object that you're looking at and into your eye, which takes in all the varied energy and transforms it into neural messages that your brain can process and organises it into what you actually see. But how do we change light waves into meaningful information? Well, what we see as light is only a small portion of the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. Light travels in waves. The wave's length and frequency determine their hue, and their amplitude determines the intensity or brightness. After taking this through the cornea and the pupil, it hits the disc behind the pupil, the lens. The lens focuses the light rays into specific images. These images are projected onto the retina, which contains all the receptor cells that begin sensing that visual information. Rather than being one whole image, it is like lots of little pixels of light energy that millions of receptors translate into neural impulses, then go back into the brain.
The neuroreceptors are called the rods and cones. Our rods detect the grayscale and is what is used in our peripheral vision as well as what helps us to see in the dark, whereas the cones detect finer detail and also colour, and are situated near the focal point called the fovea, and unfortunately can only be used in light conditions, otherwise we would be able to see clear colouring during the night. When the rods and cones are stimulated, they trigger a chemical change that sparks neural signals that activate the cells behind them, which are called bipolar cells. Now, these then activate the ganglion cells, and it's the tails of these ganglions that coil together and form the optic nerve, which is what takes those neural impulses from the eyeball up to the brain.
The visual information then slips through a chain of progressive complex levels as it goes through the optic nerve to the thalamus and into the brains of the visual cortex. The visual cortex is housed in the occipital lobe, which is at the back of the brain. Each cortex possesses information from the opposing eye. Within the cortex are specialized cells called feature detectors. These respond to specific things like shapes, angles, and movements. This is where different parts of the brain are responsible for different things, hence why some brain injuries can affect one thing and not the other. Some cells in a region may just respond to one type of stimulus, like posture, movement, or facial expressions, whilst other clusters of cells weave all that information together, creating a complete analysis of a situation. The homunculus is a visual representation of the brain's different areas of operation for motor control. The creature is a visual representation of the regions of the body which have more complex sensory and motor connections. So, the bigger the body area, the more complex the connections. The ability to process and analyze many different aspects of a situation at once is called parallel processing. In regards to vision, this means that the brain simultaneously works on making sense of colour, motion, form, and depth all at the same time. This is where perception then fits in. Additionally, proprioception is another important element to recognise, and it is what most people will call our sixth sense. Proprioception is the sense of position and movement of our limbs and trunk, and the sense of effort, force, and of heaviness. This is possible through the use of receptors located in the skin, the muscles, and the joints to build the internal sense of our bodies. This sixth sense is not only useful with all the other 5 senses, but is also helpful when one of these senses fail. For example, being able to close your eyes and touch your nose correctly is an example of your proprioceptive sense working harder when your vision is impaired.
But firstly, let's run you through some motor tasks that will help you to understand what the role of vision is and how it interacts with our other senses. Firstly, you will need to put your hands into this position. Cross your hands and curl them up like this. Now, either by thinking of a finger that you'd like to move or by asking a partner to verbally tell you which finger they want you to move, try and move that finger. Now, This time I want you to try it a second time, but you need to ask your partner to touch the finger that they want you to move. And this time you will get a little bit of a different result. This activity demonstrates the relationship between vision and touch. The first activity generally has more errors and it takes a longer time before you're able to move the finger that your partner has asked you to. Whereas the second time, when touch is involved, it's usually quicker and is more accurate. This is a demonstration of visual dominance and sometimes shows how we have an over-reliance on our vision and can lead to slower responses or errors in our performance.
Our sense of balance is another skill which can be compromised with the loss of vision. Equilibrium is our balance system which allows us to stay upright and to know where our bodies are in relation to gravity. Our vestibular system, which allows us to do this, is located in our inner ear. There are several ways in which we can upset or challenge this system. It could simply be by spinning on a chair, riding in an elevator, riding on a rocky boat, or something which we all would have experienced as children, trying to walk along a gutter with our eyes closed. During the activities such as spinning on a chair, riding in an elevator, or a rocky boat, you may feel strange or even sick. This is due to the special part in your inner ear called the labyrinth, which houses fluid and hair cells that is controlled by the movement of your head. So when you stop spinning or the elevator stops, there is a delayed feeling that you have stopped, because there is a disconnect between your senses. The reason you feel sick on a boat is for the same reason. Your eyes can see that the deck of the boat is still, but the rock of the boat still causes the fluid to move in your ear, which causes a conflict between the senses, leaves your brain confused, and you normally feeling sick. When walking along a gutter with our eyes closed, without vision, equilibrium is compromised and we rely heavily on proprioception to understand where our body is in space. Remembering, however, that 70% of our receptors are in our eyes, so by taking away the ability of vision is leaving you with two weaker senses, which is why the activity becomes so difficult.
It is also believed that vision does affect the way that we hear. Now, what I believe is probably the coolest way to demonstrate this is through something that's called the McGurk effect. Now, I want you to watch these next two clips really carefully. There will be two different clips shown, and I want you to see if you can tell what the person is saying in each of them.
Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba.
The illusion occurs because what we see overrides what we hear. So the mouth movements that we see when we look at a face actually influences what we are hearing. If we were to close our eyes, we begin to hear the sounds that are being made. However, since we usually look at someone when they are talking, our understanding of their dialogue is actually slightly biased, and we can see what we want to hear. It demonstrates that we can't always trust what we hear, because our vision does take over. This is a sensory conflict, and in a nutshell means that we should probably not always believe what we see.
Let's find an example that relates to you performing a motor task, such as a sporting skill. Do you ever remember when you were growing up being taught to catch, hit or kick a ball? The number one thing I remember when I was taught was being told to keep your eye on the ball, and this by no means is a bad instruction. However, there is a little bit of a loophole. A 2014 study revealed that on average, participants tracked a ball they were going to catch approximately 95% of the time when they actually caught the ball successfully, and approximately 93% of the time when they did not catch the ball successfully. These results are so similar that it clearly shows that dropping the ball does not actually have a strong relationship with a failure to track a ball. An activity that can show that this is the case goes as follows. Two people stand about 5 meters apart and one person throws the ball to the other person 10 times. This is then repeated, however this time the catcher's hands are covered. This makes it more difficult to catch the ball. However, it is likely that the person will still catch it most of the time. Finally, the task is repeated again, but this time you can only see the ball leave the thrower's hand for a brief moment, and the path of motion is taken away. This time, it is more likely that the least amount of balls will be caught. In elite athletes who play sports, which involve reacting to the movements of fast balls such as cricket and baseball, are unable to track the ball. However, they are able to accurately hit the ball so often because of their heightened predictive skills of speed, angle, and projectile motion of the ball after it leaves the pitcher or bowler's hand. Interestingly, it was also found that not only did batters synchronize their head movements with the trajectory of the ball, but they also made anticipatory eye movements towards the bat so that they could see the moment the ball comes into contact with it. Hence, research is telling us not to keep our eye on the ball, but to keep our eye on where the ball is going to be.
There are a range of disabilities, diseases, and abnormalities as a result of injury which can deviate motor control away from its normal processes. Now, since we've been mainly talking about vision, the most obvious thought would be varying degrees of vision impairments right up to complete blindness. For example, someone who has double vision or diplopia, which is the inability to see one clear picture.
This can be caused by a number of things, such as problems with the cornea, which focuses on incoming light, problems with the lens, which helps focus light onto the retina from degenerations like cataracts, problems with the retina itself, which turns light into electrical signals from impairments such as macular degeneration, problems with muscles in the eye which help to rotate the eye from things such as Graves' disease. Nerves which carry visual information from the eyes to the brain can be affected by MS or diabetes, and problems with the brain itself from things such as strokes, brain tumours and migraines, which affect several areas that process visual information from the eyes. The reason your brain does not correct this physical abnormality is because each eye is actually pointing in a slightly different angle, which causes them to send different images to your brain. Because these images from each eye are too different to create a single clear image, and the brain perceives two images, it causes double vision. It is fairly obvious as to what it would be like to perform motor tasks with double vision, and you can almost understand it by trying to do a task whilst you're going cross-eyed. For example, go cross-eyed and try picking up something off the table. Was it as simple as it normally is? Without treatment, you can imagine how everyday life would be made up of literally double the choices, and understand the frustration of living in an indistinct world.
The list of problems that vision impairments can create are endless, but needless to say, if you had a choice, vision would not be the sense that you would want to lose. Whether it's picking up a cup of coffee or shaking someone's hand, or maybe shooting a basketball, the guidance of vision is without a doubt one of the most helpful tools that we own.